Well, sadly, Evan is not with us this week, so we didn't need that beautiful bit of legalese. But George, Max,
rip
all
to
you
his
kids
GPU.
Right to his GPU. Right. But we carry on. We keep going. You're done.
Yeah.
What is going on?
That's so weird. Could it be? Or here's the thing. So you're like you're the host, right? Could there be some kind of like Riverside bug where like the host recordings are shutting off for some reason, and maybe it's just temporary? Yeah.
This is so weird. Are you getting a specific error code? It doesn't say hardware limitations or anything?
Is your hard drive like full? Yeah, like, I'm wondering if like wherever it records to locally, if like it's like an issue there. You might want to try like.
It shouldn't record locally. It should be recording straight up to Riverside.
No, it records locally and then it uploads.
I'm good at stick to words and content. Hi guys. I'm the personality hire of the group.
Could it be like a browser caching issue?
Chad also says try rejoining in an incognito window.
No, he says try rejoining in an incognito window.
Winder? Incognito.
George, you got to join incognitus.
See, this is what you get when you join us. The perk of membership.
Yeah. We should honestly like stream these to LinkedIn.
Jesus Christ. So I'm using my friend's desk, and like I have a thick thighs saves lies kind of issue, and I almost just took out her whole desk trying to see it.
Say that wallpaper is beautiful.
Should too. Why don't we do that?
I don't know, because
maybe I have to stop making inappropriate jokes.
And Chad's nice and doesn't report us to the authorities when we fuck up. I'm
like super nice.
Yeah.
Liz, why are you single? Watch the unedited versions of HubHeroes. There you go.
My God.
It was so funny. A friend of mine was talking to me the other day, though, and she's like, well, don't you want to be in a relationship? I'm like, well, so here's the thing. This is the longest I've ever been single in my whole life. And now I'm like, I get to be like weird and have all of my own weird behavior. And I have adult money.
Ruin
like,
that.
I don't know. Although, oh my God, I had a situation the other week because I wear a lot of sunscreen. So I do not look like I'm about to turn 42, which is very nice.
Yep.
But I did have a young gentleman who tried to ask me out. And then I watched the soul escape out of his eyes when I was like, so wait, how old do you think I am? And he was like, I don't know, 34. I'm like, I said, so add 7. I'm like, okay. Thank you for the ego boost. You may move along.
Thank you. Feels good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Go on now.
Back.
George, what did you say that, just so I know, what it just says Riverside stop recording. That's it.
Well, hopefully it doesn't happen again, but if it happens again, I'll tell you exactly what it says. But right now I'm recording, so that's a good thing.
Okay.
That is a good thing. Okay, so let's try this. Let's roll into it.
Okay. So I'm going to pick us up from the fact that we cut it off while Devin while the legal stuff was happening. All right.
Yep.
Let's see what happens. Yeah, sadly, we do not need all that legal language this week. Devin is out. He has left us to our own devices, Max and George. Can we handle it? Do we think we can handle it?
Yeah, we're ready to rock and roll.
Okay, I'm going to be perfectly honest. Both of you are way too calm and chill right now, which usually means things are about to become catastrophically chaotic.
It might get that way.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, HubSpotters of all stripes, welcome back to another episode of Hub Heroes. And George, I want to start off today's conversation by giving you a pretty big shout out. You rolled out probably one of the most epic Why Go HubSpot guides for growing businesses I have ever seen.
It's pretty dope.
Your goal was to make the business case for HubSpot overall, but also give a thorough overview of each platform. And this is going to lead us nicely into our discussion. But just for the listeners at home, why was it important for you to make this guide specifically?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's a lot of, I should be ready with the button. There's a lot of humans out there who either aren't using HubSpot in general or aren't using all of the hubs that they could potentially be using to gain the growth, the streamlined processes, just ability to do business in a better way and create a better experience. And also, I think what this guide does really good, because it's why go HubSpot. It's not why go HubSpot marketing, why go HubSpot sales, like separate pieces. It's one piece that is looking at it as like a holistic, dare I say, like customer platform view of what HubSpot is actually building. And so, it's let's be honest, attract new folks who aren't using HubSpot. B, educate those who are using parts of HubSpot that maybe should use more. And C, just a really value-packed piece of content around all the things that you could be thinking about and doing with HubSpot.
What was fascinating to me about this guide as I was reading through it, because you and I talked about it earlier this week, which is what is leading us into today's discussion, is that answering the question, why go HubSpot, has radically changed over the years, because HubSpot has challenged us all as businesses and organizations, marketers, leaders, whomever, to grow better. And I think we had a much more one-dimensional understanding of what that was many, many moons ago. Growing better was through inbound marketing, and then it was inbound marketing and sales. But then they started going deeper into what makes businesses run, their operations, right? So you and I were talking about this earlier this week, because we actually haven't, as a group, talked about the Operations Hub specifically since the beginning of last year. It's been a really long time. And the HubSpot Operations Hub, let's all be clear, has been around since 2021, which was, I had forgotten that. I thought it was much newer. And George, you and I were talking about this earlier this week, because even though it's been around now for 3 years, it is something that still seems to confuse a lot of people. There's still a lot of confusion around, well, when we say operations, what does that mean? Who actually is this hub for? So we wanted to take some time today to revisit this hub and specifically talk about operations the way we talked about customer delight with Christina Garrett, right? Like, what actually is operations? Who is actually responsible for it? And since HubSpot Operations Hub is different, I think, than a lot of the way other hubs are constructed, it's created some gray, some vague. So George, to kick us off, can you give the folks at home a quick refresher on what HubSpot Operations Hub is? And when we say operations, what does that even mean?
Yeah. So the way that I like to look at this and kind of think about Operations Hub, by the way, is dramatically different than any hub. And I think that's probably half the problem, is like, it's called a hub, even though I wouldn't call it a hub. Like Marketing Hub, it's marketing, a set of marketing tools. Sales Hub is a set of sales tools. Commerce Hub is a set of tools for doing commerce and actually getting paid. Operations Hub is a set of tools that make all of those tools be more awesome. Operations Hub is about data hygiene. Operations Hub is about extending what you can do with things like workflows or custom coded bots. It's about making certain things that right now, if you don't have Operations Hub, might feel very manual. Making them very automagical. When you start to think about like data quality and properties and automatic deduplication based on properties and some of these other things that we're going to get into, it really does streamline the processes that are wrapped around multiple hubs inside your portal. So that's how I think about Operations Hub. I think that's also why it might be somewhat confusing to people. And also, let's be honest, it's one of the hubs, air quotes, that has kind of the less features than any other hub, but those less features might be more powerful.
Interesting. So let's dig into the second part of my question there, which is really kind of digging into how people define the operations of their business. And I like what you said there just now about the fact that because it has fewer features, it showcases fewer bells and whistles, its power might be missed. And I think when we think about growth, we think about the shiny stuff, right? It's kind of the way I like to think about it is when you think about you're rebranding a business, right? You immediately want to jump into like logos, fonts, colors, design, aesthetics, visuals. But that's not where you're supposed to start, right? You start by having conversations about, well, who is your audience? What are your goals? What are your core values? The things that inform those decisions. And I always notice people get kind of bogged down. I don't want to do it. I want to look at the cut. Have you seen this pretty beep boop thing on the internet? I want to look like that. And I almost think about operations the same way, right? We want to have the efficient marketing, the efficient sales, the efficient service, but there is some core operational stuff we need to master as businesses in order to do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and let me even go at, like, I love your analogy, but to me, it's even a little bit like this. So when you think about a house, you think about the house as being finished. You think about the house with the drywall and the paint and the wallpaper and all of that stuff. But imagine if when you were building that house, somebody used the 2x4s that actually already had termites in it, or they used 2x4s or 4x4s that are already rotted. And the reason I'm bringing up termites or wood that is already rotted is because if you're not paying attention to your data and your data hygiene and the data quality that you have, if you're not monitoring that, if you're not paying attention to like the properties and formatting issues that lead into personalization and segmentation and like literally operations, a big piece of this when you think about platform and process is the making sure your foundational pieces don't suck. So when you go to use some of these other bells and whistles tools, that the data actually makes sense and shows or acts in a way that it should versus being rotten, aka dirty data, formatted improperly, just a bunch of like, and literally I got off the phone with a person who wants us to do an audit. Their words, not mine. Our HubSpot portal is garbage. We need to know how to fix it.
Oh my gosh. A shovel and Jesus. Max, I want to ask you a question really quick. Hi, buddy. I also want to hear from you. Yeah. So when you were at HubSpot, obviously, you spent a lot of time basically as an organizational and operational therapist for companies, right? Before you went over to Happily. And I'd be curious to hear from you, from your perspective. How did you see most organizations struggle to wrap their brains around what operations within their business actually was? Were there any themes or common misconceptions?
Well, I mean, operations is such a like nebulous term. I mean, like the way that I understood, or the way that I kind of like came to terms with the whole word of revenue operations, like entering the HubSpot space when I was trying to like figure out what it actually meant. And to this day, I don't think anyone's really ever agreed on it. For me, it's like revenue operations is what you're doing when you're doing all the things in HubSpot together and getting them all to work with each other and all that kind of stuff, at least from a technology standpoint, right? Revenue operations is also strategic and all things that don't have to do with technology, right? But like, a lot of the things that you're doing when you're using like a whole hub of HubSpot tools is supporting a greater revenue operations strategy from a technology perspective. So I think it's tough because everyone had different definitions of what operations actually meant. On top of that, before the whole revenue operations thing really kind of came around, you saw a lot of the teams kind of siloed doing their own thing. There was sales ops, marketing ops, service ops, and nothing was really kind of like connected under like a single title or department or methodology or practice or whatever you want to call it, right? Like, I don't want to say there's one right word for it, right? But there's certainly a lot of confusion businesses had evaluating Operations Hub because, to put it quite as nice as I can, HubSpot sales reps didn't even know what Operations Hub, right? So, like I can't tell you how many times I had to explain it to people, right? So again, it's just one of those words that, everyone has a different definition for, right? Chris in the chat, and still don't, you are correct. Any HubSpot sales reps that want an easy way to pitch Operations Hub, hit me up.
We love you.
We love you so much. I do love you.
Yeah, especially all of you folks out there who are like, Content Hub is just AI.
Yeah.
We love how... Sorry to bring up something so violent.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has their own different. It's just like the word campaign. Everyone has a different definition for the word campaign.
Sales enablement.
Definition for the word enablement. Also, everyone has a different definition for the word operations, right? So I don't want to necessarily think that customers were generally confused around it, right? It's more so it either wasn't something that was paid attention to. They had their own definitions for it. Sometimes they were doing it without knowing they were doing it, and sometimes they didn't have it at all. Right. So it's in terms of the businesses themselves. I mean, it's just generally all over the place. And you see that a lot working at HubSpot because you're talking to businesses of all sorts of maturity levels and organization and size and scope and types. And, it's never the same conversation, I guess, is the easiest way to say it.
Do you know what I'm hearing? And George, I would be curious to get a pulse on what you think on what I'm about to say. I'm noticing globally, I made that as a joke, right? Like the Content Hub AI comment. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, go back to our first conversation about Content Hub AI in this feed because it was emotional and upsetting. But when I think about what you're saying there, Max, these lack of shared definitions, I think for a long time we didn't necessarily have to have them. I think as growth and what it means to do business as a modern business in a digital world has changed. It's forcing organizations to become much more sophisticated in a scalable way that was maybe not necessarily as much of a requirement in a more analog or less digital dependent world. I remember when I first started out in inbound, when I was at Quintain Marketing, this is about 10 years ago, we used to have to talk to our clients and say, you don't have a process. A process isn't a process if it's only in your head. A process is written down. And so I think for a long time, we were able to get away without having shared definitions, because when you start adding technology and automation into the mix, if you don't have shared definitions, if you don't have clear processes, it scales your inefficiencies, it scales your problems, and it starts bringing a spotlight onto the problems or the things you haven't defined, like into harsh relief. And so I think that's part of what we're seeing. We make jokes about, do you know what enablement is, or can you just spell it? I think we're seeing that across the board thematically as we're starting to automate and scale more parts of our business, as we're being asked to do more with less because of all different factors. This is something that's, I think, becoming more noticeable, a problem that maybe has been there for a really long time, but it's been dormant until we started scaling different parts of our business.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. The other thing that comes to mind that I think is very interesting is, and you've all kind of probably heard the saying of like, we'll build the plane while it's flying or build the ship while we're sailing. Literally since it's like we've been in this vehicle called HubSpot. And let's just call it like a Volkswagen Bug in 2012, right? And we're driving down the road and we're trying to do better business and we're trying to be more human. And all of a sudden we get to like 2014, 2015. We're still driving the VW Bug, but we look around and we realize, holy shit, I'm in a Mitsubishi Cordia. Like, how'd that happen? I thought I was in a Volkswagen Bug. And we're driving down the road and we're trying to do better business. All of a sudden we realize it isn't an automatic anymore. It's a stick shift. So now we had to figure out what a freaking clutch is and how that works. And so then we're driving down the road a little bit further and we get to like 2018, 2020, and we look around and we're like, oh my God, like I'm in a Lexus. I thought I was driving a Mitsubishi, but originally I was in a Volkswagen Bug. We haven't ever gotten out of the car. We're still using the vehicle that is HubSpot, but it's literally changing around us. We haven't gone in to look at what has changed in the engine, the fact that we now have a turbo in there, the fact that it's a timing chain, not a timing belt, the fact that there's all these, we got a new CD player. It used to be a tape deck. Shit, when we started, it was an 8-track. And here's the yeah, we're gonna get canceled. That was a little late, but we're still gonna get canceled. But like, yes, here's Coach, the thing,
like, you always say the worst stuff.
This is literally what's happening in the HubSpot ecosystem. Is all of a sudden we're driving down the road and it's a completely different vehicle. And so if we take this and we dive into this conversation or specifically to Operations Hub when all of a sudden we're driving a vehicle that has this additional part on it, and which, by the way, if you were to ask people before Operations Hub came along, what are the two places that you have the most difficult time in with HubSpot? One would have been reporting. The second one would have been workflows. Well, holy crap. What does Operations Hub actually leverage in a couple of its major pieces? HubSpot workflows with reoccurring, things that you can do and different custom coded workflows. And like all of a sudden, something that was already complex in the vehicle that they're driving, it becomes more complex, or at least feels like it now has this level of complexity of features, which then, going to your point, Liz, creates this thing of like not shared definitions, or what we can easily say is lack of understanding. Like, we haven't gotten out, we haven't checked the oil, we haven't checked the coolant, we don't understand what the engine is. We're not even sure how the seats changed right underneath us as we were driving down the road. So of course people are confused, and they need this terminology and new understanding, and they need to be able to be okay with what's happening in the ecosystem. We talked about it last week, but this rapid development of this car called HubSpot that we're driving down the road is somewhat insane at this point of trying to keep up with it. Right now, today, you're in a freaking Lamborghini or a Bugatti. You pick. It's up to you. But what vehicle are we going to be driving in 3 months or 6 months? I have no clue, because it's
Something
always
hopefully
changing.
with bigger bucket seats.
Big bucket seats is good.
No, so, George, when I hear you saying these things, honestly, when you said that whole thing, build the boat while we're sailing it, I had just like Vietnam level flashbacks to all the different startup cultures and agency cultures I have been a part of. Because whenever people say that, it's like, guys, at some point we do actually have to have a boat. We can't perpetually be in a state of building. And what I think Operations Hub does nicely, and what it throws a spotlight on, is the fact that if you have if you're telling everybody to build a boat, right? You're talking to your marketing team, you're talking to your sales team, you're talking to your service team. They're all going to focus on building a boat in a way that serves them. At some point, you need someone who's focusing on the entire boat, all the teams together, to make sure none of us sink. And that's where holistic overall operations comes in. But I just want to say this one more time for my agency pros who are listening right now. It is okay to keep saying we need to build the boat while we're sailing it, but once more with feeling, at some point you need a boat.
Yeah.
At some point you actually need to get to boat status. So, okay. We talked a lot about So we've talked a lot about why folks are confused by the idea of operations and HubSpot Operations Hub overall and its potential. But I want to lob a potentially, I don't know. Let's see what happens when I just ask this question. Who is actually responsible then for business operations? Who is it?
See, my brain goes in two different directions. Max, what's your thoughts before I go?
Again, this is one of those things where I don't think there's one right answer for it, right? And it also, I think, depends on ultimately the answer is the COO, right? If you don't have a COO, it's whoever is in charge, making sure people are setting up processes and things like that. If we're looking at it through the lens of HubSpot, the product, right? That's falling on your admins, right? The people who have the most line of sight to everything going on, right? Maybe you have a revenue operations team. Maybe you just have one or two, more siloed teams, things like that. It's got to be somebody, right? And I think it's not so much more like who's responsible for it, is like, why is it important to have someone responsible for it, right? Especially when you're using a tool like HubSpot. If you've got a whole bunch of different teams in there, all doing their own different stuff, right? And again, this is true for any system you're using. It's not just a HubSpot thing, right? If you've got multiple teams that are all using their own technology or in charge of their piece of that same technology, and no one is considering like, well, what if we do this thing here? How's that going to affect team number 2 and what they're doing and the things that they've set up for team number 3 and like all this kind of stuff? Like, you need someone to be responsible for how it's all tying together and how it's all working together, because that's where you have bad customer handoffs, really shitty marketing communication, really, tough processes that customers have to go through that no one cares about fixing, things like that. Right. So it's not necessarily, I think, who is supposed to be, it's just someone needs to be, right. In terms of making sure it's all working together and functioning properly. Right. And I think that's kind of like, where you start to think about revenue operations. It's like someone who's not just looking at, has the responsibility for operations within their own segment of the business, but someone who's actually saying how are we, orchestrating, if you will, the operations across all areas of the business. So we're all working in the same direction and not, bucking things up for each other. Oops, sorry, shit. There we go. Anyway, got to it.
Yeah.
Just as effective afterward. Just as effective.
But, that's how I think about it.
So it's interesting because our answers are going to slightly rhyme. Here's the thing. I totally agree with you, Max, where it should be somebody, because somebody's better than nobody, but be careful because it shouldn't be everybody. This is definitely a place where too many chefs in the kitchen is not going to make a good soup. And the place that I'll go, like typically when you think about operations, Max, you're right. It's like a chief operating officer. It might be an operations manager. It might be a business operations analyst. It might be even in some organizations, IT manager or director. Heck, it might even be a department head. But here's where, when I said my brain goes in two different directions, that's almost like just getting started with HubSpot or pre-HubSpot, maybe business mindset that might be in place. But when you talk specifically, people listening to this podcast, if you have HubSpot and you have multiple hubs, like literally this is the super admin should be the person paying attention to operations and what the operations hub can do. And if you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, well, I don't have a super admin in your organization. Actually, you do. You just haven't. Yeah, you haven't defined them yet. And it might be you, by the way, because if you're doing the thing and paying attention to multiple departments and multiple hubs, you're a super admin. You just don't know it yet. And so when the conversation comes to, should we upgrade to Operations Hub Starter, Pro, or Enterprise, or who should be digging into these features and seeing if they're right for what we need to fix the potholes that we have, guess what? It's probably you, with a slight conversation to whoever pays the bills to be able to actually buy the dang thing.
I am having way more thoughts and opinions during this episode than I thought I would. I'll be honest, because like I'm the content nerd, right? I didn't think I was going to get as hyped up about this, but I have a thing I need to throw out here to you, George and Max, because when I think about the organizations that I have worked with, some of the organizations that I do work with, and I think about the way most people hire and have historically hired HubSpot expertise into their company, usually they're not hiring a HubSpot specialist specifically. Often, in many cases, they are hiring a marketer with some sort of marketing automation expertise where it is a delegated responsibility that falls under a much more focused discipline, a marketing person, a this, a that. And so I love this idea of what we're talking about from the ideal state of you likely already have a HubSpot super admin in your care. That's true, but that also may look like for many of the people listening to this podcast, an inbound marketing or specialist or content marketing manager, where that's part of what they do, but it's not all of what they do, and they were brought in as part of a specific team. So when we look at it through that lens, and I all like George, you even, when I said earlier when Max was talking about, whomever is in charge of your operations, part of me wanted to go, bold of you to assume that many of these organizations have someone in charge of operations. Often it's like delegated as weird responsibilities. You kind of own what you own. And most of the organizations I talk to do not have that. They're not that mature or sophisticated, not because they aren't mature or sophisticated organizations. Their size just doesn't require a COO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I don't know, George. I see you.
The other thing I want to add into is like, I don't want to draw a false equivalency from, saying Operations Hub is for operations teams, right? Like, if anything, Operations Hub should really be called Data Hub, like, because it's really just, it's the best way to get control of your data inside of HubSpot, right? And like, a marketing operations team or a revenue operations team or an operations team, whatever, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, if they're using HubSpot, it's them using the sum of all the parts is doing operations in HubSpot. It's like how you set your stuff up, how you set your customer handoffs off, how do you build processes, like how does the thing work, right? Like Operations Hub can play a role in that, right? But it's not like it's like the hub built for the operations team, right? It's really just it's saying, hey, super duper admin, you want to get hella control of your freaking data? Like this is going to give you some extra tools to be able to do that, right? So data operations is probably like I guess a better, more specific way to say it. But, you know, I don't know. Operations Hub, like the name to me is like, you know, it's a little too broad and a little.
It's misleading.
Wild. Yeah,
it totally. Literally is misleading to be honest. Like, and I think that is why it adds to the confusion. And I agree with you. Like if it was Data Operations and Hygiene Hub or something, like it would make a lot more sense.
CMS Hub went to Content Hub. Maybe Operations Hub. You're gonna get that Data Hub rebuild. Yeah, that would make so much more sense to people. Because like if you think about like all the core features across everything, all for each whether it's free to pro or enterprise or whatever, every single feature that it adds in there that's unique to Operations Hub has something to do with data, right?
Yep.
You could argue scheduled workflows is not necessarily like a data specific thing.
Bull crap.
I know workflows are.
Listen. I'm using that. You know what I'm using that for? I'm using that to delete contacts out of different lists.
True.
Because and which is cleaning up my data. Because it's people I shouldn't be talking to anymore. So, like, that's the thing. If you pull a thread, all of it leads back.
I think gating scheduled workflows behind Operations Hub is trash. I think everyone should just have it, right? That's just me. I don't think you should have to buy, because a lot of people need that, right? And oftentimes that was like, it would be super awkward for me as an SE when someone said, well, I want to be able to, or can I build a workflow that'll, you know, every day at 5, it'll do this thing. And I go, yeah, but you got to buy a whole nother hub for that. And they're like, that's weird. I don't have any other use case for it. Right. And so like, that to me is like kind of goofy. Like I could understand putting it at like maybe a enterprise level of any other hub. Right. But having it be its own separate hub just for that seems like a, you know, weird way to just get people onto it for that one reason.
Well,
right? But
don't even get me started on that. We once had webhooks and then we didn't have webhooks. Anyway, that's not what we're here for. So I'll be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
George, do you need a hug?
No, I'm already part of a HubSpot user group.
Oh,
wah, wah, wah.
Bam!
And here, I like how it's a shots fired when I was trying to be nice to you, but we'll just go ahead and move along. Look at you, carrying your heavyweight championship belt when I was just trying to be nice. Let this be remembered. You know what I think is fascinating about this conversation, though, when we think about business operations and whether it's called Data Hub or Operations Hub, what I think as a part of this messaging that was missed and is an opportunity is that HubSpot, with the introduction of Operations Hub, is encouraging people to stop looking at your HubSpot data through the lens of a specific team. Don't just look at your marketing data and then look at your sales data and then look at your service data. It is encouraging them to put a human resource, a human perspective, somebody who looks at your data overall and says, how is it moving around my organization? How is it moving between teams? Is it moving as efficiently and effectively as possible? Because again, when you think about it, it's like the boat thing earlier, right? If the marketing team is always going to look at it through the marketing lens, the sales team is always going to look at it through the sales team. And that's what they should do. Like they have KPIs, they have goals. It is really this push toward your operations are now more sophisticated. You used to be able to have this as a decentralized set of responsibilities, maybe a delegated set of tasks that rolls up under somebody else on a specific team. It just doesn't work that way anymore. So I'd be curious to hear from both of you who HubSpot Operations Hub is actually right for. Because I think, to your point, George, earlier when we were talking about the confusion around it, it makes it hard to understand who should be investing into it, particularly since it has powerful features, but fewer shinier ones.
Yeah. Max, you want me to take this one? You want to take this one first? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Like a lot of the time, I think it's great for people who have a particular need that Operations Hub solves for. And I know that's like a really boring answer, but like one of the biggest things that like made my blood boil, right, is when I would watch sales calls on Gong and the salesperson would identify that somebody needs an integration to some tool that doesn't exist on the app marketplace, and they'd go, oh, you can do it with Operations Hub, right? And it's like, no, like Operation Hub does not mean easy button integration with anything that doesn't have an existing integration, right? What I will say it is it's a great companion to integrations, in that not all integrations are built the same, right? There are probably, there's an infinite amount of ways that integrations can push data into HubSpot. That data may not be clean, right? It may be in a weird format. It might be coming through in strange ways, right? Operations Hub gives you a lot of really cool tools and workflows to clean it up and to format it in a correct way, right? And sometimes HubSpot serves as a destination point for data to come in and then go land somewhere else in some other system, right? And oftentimes
nice and clean.
You can use HubSpot or like your central point of truth, or however you want to kind of think of it, as a place to cleanse that data before it makes it to its final destination, right? So I think, while Operations Hub doesn't let you just create integrations out of thin air, right, with tools that don't have native integrations, it serves as a great companion to integrations that you've either built or integrations that do exist on the HubSpot app marketplace that throw data into HubSpot in a really shitty way, right? So that's one thing. I think there's also like a lot of the, if this is happening to you, you probably could benefit from Operations Hub, right? So like, for example, if you're planning on using any of HubSpot's data sync integrations, you at least want Starter, because that gives you the ability to do custom field mappings, right? If you want to be able to run workflows on a schedule, right? So every day do this instead of dealing with like weird roundabout ways to do workflow re-enrollments and stuff like that, then yeah, Operations Hub makes sense. If you want to be able to make workflows do almost anything, it makes sense because you could do custom coded workflow actions, right? What is the other one? So it's triggering webhooks, right? So if you got to send data to systems outside of HubSpot and you just have like an API endpoint you can send stuff to, right? Triggering webhooks is great. But then I think also like a big one is if you're using business units and you have like multiple teams with multiple brands and a lot of different like teams working inside of HubSpot, and they're all putting like their own properties and like all this stuff that's like relevant to one team but not another, data sets in Operations Hub Enterprise is going to be your best friend, because you can enable those teams to create reporting using data that's just relevant to them, instead of going into the custom report builder and seeing everything in there and making it really confusing and adding a ton of friction to those different teams needing to report on stuff, right? I guess also you could say like if your company uses Snowflake and you want to dump your HubSpot data into there, right? Enterprise is also great. But I think also too, the reason it's good as well is like for folks like stepping into a HubSpot portal for the first time and doing like an audit of like what the heck is going on in here, right? You've got your data quality command centers, you've got your property analytics or like whatever it is that'll kind of show you how your properties and stuff are being used, right? A lot of the duplicate management stuff is super sweet. So it's like if you have like specific problems like around data, there's likely something in Operations Hub that's going to help you out, right? If you're syncing a ton of data from other systems into HubSpot through either homegrown integrations or just third-party tools, you're almost always going to find a use case for it, at least on like the data hygiene and formatting and cleanliness side of things, right? So you can kind of get a handle on all that stuff, right? So yeah, really, if any of those like use cases like, come up in someone's head as they're listening to this and you don't have Operations Hub, you should probably check it out. I think everyone should have Pro at least, just because of scheduled workflows alone, right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I'm going to go, I believe with everything you said, Max. I'm going to go at this a little bit different. And I know usually I start with the humans, but this time I'm going to start with the humans. I'm not going to start with the humans this time.
Whoa.
If you're a company looking to streamline your processes and automate the operational needs in your organization, doesn't matter if you're small or enterprise. If you're a company trying to do those two things, then Operations Hub is probably a good fit for you. if you're an operations team or a professional in a team that might not be called that, but is focusing on managing data quality, integrations, and process automation, then the Operations Hub might be right for you. If you are handling the system integrations and you require these deep, dope, custom automation solutions that will tie into, like Max kind of said, the partner or the sidekick, if you will, to those, then like IT would be good. Technical, teams. These would be reasons why they might be a good fit for operations. If you start to think about individual departments, all of the individual departments will enjoy clean data, will enjoy automated workflows, will enjoy integrated systems that are tightly integrated together with things like data sync to enhance their efficiency and effectiveness. So this could be marketing, sales, service. Heck, if your company is sitting here and you actually have a position that is a data analyst, the individuals who have to focus on advanced reporting and data manipulation capabilities. Max mentioned data sets, but even just being able to report on freaking clean data is beautiful, right? So any of those things that you need, or if you're any of those types of people, humans, or companies, then you're probably heading in the right direction. And Max, I would agree with you. Like, starter's cool. You can do data sync and custom fields, but when you get into operations pro, now all of a sudden you're really unlocking some sweet stuff. And I think it's Yamini. She calls it like the secret sauce or the sweet sauce or something like that. That Operations Hub is like the sweet sauce of HubSpot, because again, it's just helping everything be better than it potentially is, even though as it is, it's pretty dang cool. So there's my thoughts.
So Max, I want to come back to you for a second, because a little birdie told me you've been doing some really cool and interesting stuff in HubSpot Operations Hub. What can you share with the rest of us in the class?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a coder by any means, except I've been going crazy building custom CMS modules using HubHeroes.
I wish you could see how happy he is with him.
I literally just built I built a module today that like sends an email to someone who registered for an event and shows all the different sessions they signed up for. And I felt like a god. But anyway, that's not Operations Hub stuff. One of the more cooler use cases that I've kind of done, and like this is great for any HubSpot sellers out there, or solution engineers, whether you're at HubSpot or you're at a partner agency. Something that I really always struggled with, when I was in a role selling HubSpot, was having like good demo data to be able to like demo HubSpot with, like make it look like the portal is lived in and alive and breathing, right? And so like things like contacts moving through life cycle stages, deals getting created, and being able to like move through different stages and either close win or close lose and stuff like that. So like when I brought up reports, I wasn't bringing up a report that had like a bunch of data that was brought in like 2 years ago, and I had to like awkwardly filter it to make the reporting not look stupid, right? And so for a while, I got really obsessed with the idea of like, how can we make a HubSpot portal kind of go on autopilot and make it look like people are using it, right? And things are happening, like deals are getting closed, contacts are getting created, like this thing's that. And
life cycle stages are being changed.
Life cycle stages,
lead statuses are being used. Yeah,
all this kind of stuff. Different records are getting created, all this kind of stuff, right? And I sat there for a while and I was just like, man, if there was like an app that you could just do a random number and then split a branching workflow based on that random number, right? And be able to do a different outcome, right? Either create a record or move a stage or do something. You could simulate some pretty cool stuff, right? And so I was sitting around waiting for Happily to build, this app that, generates a random number, right? Something simple, nice little easy utility app. And then I was talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to. I think it was Carter McKay. And he's like, dude, it's really easy just to like generate a random number using a custom coded workflow action. I'm like, sick, show me how. And he showed me, or whoever it was showed me. I ended up building this whole portal out that would take contacts that were like dumped into HubSpot and then run them through these workflows that would hit a custom coded workflow action that would simply just generate a random number. And then what I could do is I could build branching workflows that would look back and say, if that number from that action equals whatever. And I basically did it like a dice roll. So I just did choose a number between 1 and 6, right? And then I could build these branches that say, all right, if the number is 1, 2, or 3, do this. If it's not, do nothing. Or like, if it's 1, do this. If it's 2, do this. If it's 3, do this. Like whatever. And so it's like a cute, like little use case that like let me do, some stuff like that. But like the other thing too is like for us on like the Happily side, like it's a really good way for us to like prototype like workflow actions that we build into our apps, right? Like we could easily build a proof of concept instead of like standing up a whole app and everything. We can be like, all right, well, have one of our devs build the code that, makes the workflow action do what we want it to do. And then we could test it and see how it works and all that stuff. And then they can go build an app or build it into an app that does it using a workflow extension. But like, there's cooler things you can do besides that, right? But like, if you ever wish a workflow action could do something else, like custom coded workflow actions like are the way for that. Cause you could literally code it to do almost anything with your HubSpot data. Right, whether it's looping through something or changing some properties in certain ways, if then statementing things like within one single action, and like just doing stuff that's hard to do just by like stringing actions together, like individual ones. It's great, right? You can even reference data in like a outside source to make a decision about something that you do, like inside of HubSpot. It's literally, if you can code it, you can do it, right? Sure, I'm pretty sure there are like some limitations in terms of different things that custom coded workflow actions can do, but they're so way above my head and developery that I'm not even sure they're even worth talking about, right? But yeah, I've been doing that, which is really cool. I do a lot of stuff with like scheduled workflows as well. So like, I built our whole partner payout system to run on like monthly, workflows that will, combine a bunch of data from stuff that we know about in terms of like which partners are associated to what app subscriptions and payments being made, and like all that stuff. So there's just like an infinite amount of stuff you could do with it, really. But
I heard there is Max is a nerd.
Data. Yeah,
Max is a nerd. That's what I heard.
He's our
nerd.
happy little nerd. Happiest little nerd.
Yes.
George, okay, I need you to put on your simplifying the complex hat. Although, actually, I'm not sure you ever take it off. But we've had some pretty complex discussions today about what business operations actually means, who the HubSpot Operations Hub is actually for. We've covered a lot of ground. So if our listeners today only walk away with a few takeaways from today's discussion, what do you want them to be?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, whether you can get Operations Hub or not. My hopes is that in the future, by the way, this is not an upsell, but in the future, I hope that if you don't have it, you can get it. Fundamentally, data hygiene, deduping contacts, keeping a shiny, clean HubSpot portal is one of what should be your main focuses on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. There's ways that you can do all of this manually. But again, much of this becomes automagical if you have HubSpot Operations Pro. The other thing that I would want people to think about is as fast as everything is changing, business, the way we sell, the way we service, the things that humans need from us, knowing that you can reach into your pocket, AKA HubSpot workflows and custom coded workflows, and you can extend what is already super powerful for all of your departments with a nicely strategized, optimized, and created custom coded workflow that when it's in place, people just step back and go, holy crap, that feels like magic, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the two things is one, be hyper focused on how do you have the dopest, cleanest data hygiene portal possible to man, and how can you enable yourself to extend the needed functionality for the teams to do the things that they need to do.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Well, I think we got it.
Okay, well then, bye everybody. See, I miss the days where we used to have like a poem or like something weird. or
Dude, the poems are probably crazy that we could make up.
Roses are red,
mean,
violets are love
God.
HubSpot Operations Hub, and you should too. Wah, wah.